Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Rachel.
Hey, y'all.
And Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Present.
I
am.
President accounted for.
Alex.
Not president,
No.
but present.
No, you're not president. Don't start any rumors. Yeah, happy Inauguration Day to you as we record this on Wednesday.
Has anybody ever been president? I'm just curious, like of a club or something like that. That's not a part of our conversation.
No, you
but I'm
just
curious.
that's that it is now. Let's see. When I was in, I don't know, second or third grade, I found my mom's old typewriter, and I started making these little like business cards out of paper, and I would type. I don't remember the name of the club I started, but I was definitely president and CEO of whatever this club was, and I tried handing them out to my friends to be part of the club, and we would meet in the playground between these two trees. Nobody ever showed up, and nobody wanted my business cards that I made on a typewriter. Wow. So that was the only time I was president.
What led
of
to the
anything.
demise? Bankruptcy? Just quit one day? Are you still technically the president?
I'm still the president of whatever that club was. I don't remember the name of it, but I had no friends. That's what I'm trying to say.
Shoot.
That's it for me. I hope someone else has a better story. You asked, by the way, Alex.
I did.
That's all.
I have not been president of anything. So, like, I've been a captain or, other things, but I've never had the title president. Like, I've never been a class president or whatever other places you can be president. I think, like, every organization has a president. I've been on some, like, smaller boards for organizations, but never have I sat in the president chair. So, there you go. Never even the vice president.
Oh, that's too bad.
So
Sorry, Alex.
it's okay.
Maybe one day. You still got lots of time.
I do. I'll be aging up to where I can run officially for president of the United States in a couple of years, and so that's what I'm waiting for.
Great.
Well, good.
I'm glad you're pre-announcing your run for office now.
I don't think I've ever been the president of anything. I'm trying to think. I was the vice president of our class in college, like 3 years, but I was never president. And I don't think I ever even wanted that title because it's just a lot more upfront, in person type things. But I like the supporting role.
Yeah, that's good. I never really wanted to be president because I always just got so annoyed about it. I was like, what's the point? Like, you can't do anything. Like, people get up there and be like, if I'm president, we're going to have our own break room and like all these things like students would get. We're going to have a day off every week. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Like, we're literally never going to have that. And if I got up there, I'd just be like, this is just for my resume and I'm not going to change anything. Like, I don't know. I just always got annoyed at the concept of it. But
until you watch Napoleon Dynamite, I mean, that was the best movie for me to like really
Pedro.
Want to vote for Pedro. I mean, that dance that he did.
That's
he
a
didn't
good
do
movie.
the dance, but Napoleon's dance. Yeah, that's something I need to watch again.
Have we as a culture come around on that movie now? Because I loved it when it came out. And then I feel like people started to hate on it because it just became this big meme. But I feel like now enough time has passed that we've healed and we can enjoy it.
I love technology.
You're gonna sing for us.
I can't say that that's like would be on my top 10 of like I had a day off and that's what I'd be doing.
I think that's why I'm in the position I'm in. I think that I love technology.
That song.
And that is why I am the director of online ministry here at the church.
It just changed the trajectory of your life.
It did. So
movie.
a president, actually Kip wasn't the president, but Kip is the guy who invited me into doing ministry here at Christ Community Church.
Oh, boy.
So there it is. It all came together.
Wow.
I really love it.
And everyone else is like...
I'm sorry. That I don't know where that president. Well, obviously it's Inauguration Day when we're recording.
Everyone is going. We need to question like what Alex is hearing.
Alex has gone rogue, and we just let him go because it's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, it is. It's good. I always look forward to any opportunity where I get to listen to Alex sing.
You're welcome,
and thank you for that. Yes, that's why we were talking about that Inauguration Day. And also on this episode, our main topic is going to be on community and finding that in the church. One of those aspects of communities is joining a group. And a lot of times when you join a group, there's always the awkward moment where they want to do an icebreaker. And I was thinking, we don't probably all have to share one, but is there has there been a time when has been a really awkward or terrible icebreaker that you've been a part of, or anything like that you would want to share with the group, share with the class? All your icebreakers have been good, Jess?
I feel like they've all been good. And at this point, like once...
What you laughing about, Alex?
Alex, don't.
I've never heard a bad one, but I'm just like, that's a lot of self-confidence. Like every icebreaker I've ever done.
Okay, listen. So,
or you're just not like aware of awkwardness, so it doesn't matter.
And it's just
That's
kind of
how
like,
I feel.
okay, an icebreaker to me is like an expected thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we just have to do it and get over it.
If you want to do a real icebreaker, you play Mafia. And then you really start to see people and like
see their
who
true
they
colors.
are, and just that's what I love to do.
People who are really good liars.
Yes. And
yeah. I feel like it's one of those things in like ministry or groups that you're just going to do.
Yeah.
There was one that I used to have because I was a camp counselor for like 6 summers. And I would always have people like go around and share their scars. And I feel like that was just kind of like an interesting thing to get to know people. But I would be scared to do that, I think, in a group of adults.
Yeah.
That reminds
Like
me
their
of the
physical
song.
scars
I know.
or mental?
I was actually thinking
I got this
emotional
scar.
scars, and I was like, wow, you
this
go
is-
deep.
Yeah, we go
really
deep.
fast.
Like back when I was in college, I knew.
I almost feel like that's safer than asking people to show their actual scars. Who knows
I don't
what
know.
they're going
It
to
was fun, just like to hear the
reveal
different
in
stories.
that moment.
Yeah.
That's a good one, actually.
Our
I like
scars
that.
remind us that the past is real.
Maybe we should
that
share
Papa
about our
Roach?
scars on one episode.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
I've got a huge one on the back of my leg.
Okay.
We'll save that for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it.
I have one due to technology and a drone, so that'd be a fun story one day.
Oh, yeah?
Got attacked by a drone, but
Leave it for.
yeah, I'll
No,
leave it.
we're leaving it for the scars episode.
Maybe next week.
It's like
Come back next week with Jess and Alex reveal.
scars, physical and mental. Well,
there you have it.
So I always fear like they do the would you rathers or the 2 truths and a lie or something like that. You do those sorts of things, but I'm always scared someone's going to say something that they shouldn't, like, and not realize, or like reveal a secret about themselves that maybe someone close to them didn't know, or some sort of like accident.
Or like you're the one that they decided to tell and they've
Yeah.
never told anyone.
That stuff always makes me a little uneasy, but I don't know.
That is true. My strategy is, and I think I already did one with Have You Ever Been the President? That was accidental, but there you go. Broke the ice. But my strategy is usually not to go first because you got to let someone else kind of set that tone in it. Because if someone else just dives right in, and you're like, oh, I just gave a shallow answer, then you're like, oh, well, there's shallow Alex again, but if someone, if you go last or later on, you can kind of gauge it, or sometimes they get really intense and you're like, I've got to turn the corner and be funny, Alex, here, because this is like turning into like a therapy session and like you might know something about a person that's sensitive information, and it might be a triggering thing. Like I've been in settings where that's happened and someone thinks they're funny and you're like, no, stop.
Please don't
Stop.
say that.
Oh, okay, we're done with that. Especially with students. I work with students for a long time, and so they're still working on figuring out their filters.
Our CrossFit gym does a question of the day every day as like an icebreaker for the class.
Oh, that's cool.
So today's question when I went was, what was your favorite smell? It's just like easy.
Yeah.
That's what's like, you got to stick with like surface level.
Yeah. I love that they do that. Like it's more of a community thing
Yeah.
than just
Community.
working out. Which
And then someone says bacon, and then they get into a theological
Yes.
debate about
Yeah.
whether we should eat pork,
Yes.
and it turns into this big fight.
Yeah, there's one person that says bacon, and the next person like, my wife. And you're like, okay, that's just, we didn't need to know
Too
that.
far. Cross the line.
Aaron, we are sorry.
I'm not saying that as my favorite smell.
I'm just going to use
yeah,
that
I
as
was
an
like,
icebreaker now.
somebody said this one time and it was really weird.
Yeah. My friend Pedro. All right.
And that's why Alex is not president.
Yeah, all of the truth has been revealed. All right, up next, we've got some headlines for you. All right, first headline for today comes from KETV 7 News. That's a news affiliate here in Omaha, Nebraska. It says Omaha Food Lovers Facebook group helps struggling restaurants. This is your feel-good story of the day. During the pandemic, a lot of restaurants have found themselves in a very difficult position trying to navigate the landscape of a pandemic and how to stay open. One such restaurant was actually not a restaurant as much as it was a food truck that had opened in March, and they were not sure what to do because they were not eligible for the PPP because they hadn't been open the previous year.
Oh, got it.
So this Facebook group, Omaha Food Lovers, came in and started helping with publicity by posting reviews from people who had eaten there. And then that kind of turned into helping other local restaurants get the word out about their, cuisine and whether they liked it or not. So it's kind of one of those neat little stories that came from a crazy year.
Yeah, I really like this story because I feel like last year it brought a lot of awareness to like small businesses. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really awesome. That was a positive thing that I feel like came out of COVID. And I mean, obviously it was kind of in a bad way just because they were struggling so much through the year. But I just think it brought a lot of attention to small businesses. And even like for Christmas, I feel like I tried to focus more on buying or like putting things on my wish list that were from small businesses or buying things for people that were from small businesses. And the same thing with just, local restaurants and stuff like that. I just think it's kind of a new way to think of things, like being more aware of where you're spending your money and stuff. And so, but I think that's really cool that this group, is able to, McDonald's can have billboards all over the place, but places like this, they just don't have the ability to do stuff like that. So it's just really cool that Facebook groups can go in and kind of help them get the word out about their restaurant.
I actually saw this group because someone had shared a comment from it. And so from out of that came during COVID, we were trying to do like takeout for small businesses. Yeah. And we found this restaurant like semi close to our house that we like have still been eating at, and it's Dragon Walk. It's a Chinese restaurant. We're, always looking for some Chinese, but yeah. It was just like out of that group, like out of just like word of mouth and people like having a passion about something and like caring about people.
Yeah.
And then it's like you go and see those people that are actually working, and it just it connects it all the way through. So
it's really cool.
Yeah. How about you guys?
I have done, I've done some takeout. There's been some different, deals, I guess we found. I feel like you're trying not to laugh at me, Jess.
He only does takeout when there's a coupon, okay? Don't laugh at him.
I am a coupon person, and one thing that I love coupons. I love a deal. What can I say? Make me a deal right now. Anyway, Shark Tank's also good, but for me, one of the things I've become very picky with my meals, and I'm always been kind of like a foodie, but right now, and I've talked about this, I eat one meal a day. And so for
really?
me,
I didn't know that.
I know,
Tell me more.
I've talked about it, but just not everyone's heard this, okay? And so for me, like I never really liked leftovers.
People could be worried about you if you don't explain that a little more.
But now, I never liked leftovers, but now even more so, because I'm like, if you eat 3 meals a day, you can strike out once, and like, okay, that one wasn't good. But for me, it's like, this is my one shot. Do not miss my chance, okay, to eat a good meal. So I get 7 meals a week.
All I can think about when you're saying this is that time you were preaching and you were working on your kitchen, and you mentioned you went to Little Caesars for dinner. And I'm just like, was that the highlight of the day?
There are times, there's a Little Caesars close to our house. There are times where,
in West
we will get our kids Little Caesars because they're willing to eat that, and Aaron and I will get like a nicer pizza.
Oh, okay.
With pepperonis.
Wow.
So there's like Oscar's is probably one of my favorite close pizza places to me.
Okay. So we get the kids the $5 cheese.
Yeah.
Greasy, just.
So life hack right there.
Okay, I'm just double checking. I was just, a little fact checking. I can't help myself.
Because we like, pizza with a lot more ingredients on it, and our kids just like pepperoni. And so for us, it's like, well, a pepperoni at some places is really, really expensive. And at Little Caesars.
No, I get it. It's fine. You don't have to explain it any further. I was just checking.
So,
no, it's true. And I think most people would agree that local restaurants, the quality of the food is so much better. Like I found a little place. I mean, I'm from Council Bluffs, live in Council Bluffs, not from, clarify. No, but there's a little place called Lincoln's Pub that does wood oven pizzas, and it's seriously like the best pizza I've eaten in this area. It's really good, and I might not have tried it if we weren't just trying to find something local and new. And it's always a better experience most of the time than your chains.
Definitely.
I guess if you go to any of these places, tell them the Uncomfortable podcast sent you.
Yeah. Use
Like
coupon
Little
code
Caesars.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, type that in.
Just see what happens. I would love if we hear feedback from these businesses trying to understand why people are just typing uncomfortable into their coupon codes.
That would be awesome.
It's not working.
Alex is going to try it.
He is.
I'm going to see what business I can get on board for this. Maybe Stories Coffee House?
Maybe.
Let's try it.
I bet they'd
If
bite.
you're
I'd
listening.
be down for that.
All right, our next headline comes from NPR.org. Like we mentioned earlier, today is the inauguration of Joe Biden. And this story is from a poem that was read at the inauguration today, titled Not Broken But Simply Unfinished. A poem by Amanda Gorman calls for a better America. And I think there were a lot of historical moments that happened today in the inauguration, things like the first Black and Asian American woman vice president with Kamala, and just also the oldest president. I don't know if that's an accomplishment, maybe, though, to ever be, made president of the United States, with Joe Biden being 78 years old. But this poem, I think it spoke to a lot of people, and it was read by a young woman with a lot of conviction. And I think that, in a time where the country is hurting and still pretty divided, and I think there's a number of people who are looking for healing and looking for common ground. And this was one of those moments. I'm going to read just like a small excerpt from it, and then we can discuss it a little bit. It says, we've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. And that was really powerful to me. I know I watched the inauguration today, and it was kind of an emotional experience for me. And it's not like, I think sometimes when it becomes so polarized, people just want to be like, oh, you think Joe Biden is Superman or whatever, and he's saving the day. And it's like, it's never, to me, it's not that. These people are civil servants. They should never be put on a pedestal like previous presidents have been. They're civil servants. They're here to aid and protect the Constitution and help the American people. And I think to see things roll out today peacefully, with just decency and humility and a sense of calm that we haven't seen, a sense of order that we haven't seen in a very long time. It's not about party. You saw presidents and congressmen from all different backgrounds, getting along and fist bumping each other because of COVID, obviously, but smiling under their masks and being civil. You just saw something that we hadn't seen in a while. And I think for me, it kind of, I don't know, for me, it really brought up a lot of emotion just to be like, okay, it's good to see something that feels, normal. Nobody else has anything to say. Okay, I sucked the oxygen out of the room. I'm sorry.
I thought I just like a different turn is when Gorman when she shared her poem. Even in reading this article, and like I just did a quick Google search, she had a speech impediment when she was younger, and then like with that, it was like lots of Google searches about Maya Angelou, and she was mute when she was younger, and I didn't know that before, but just how cool it is, just how like that's so triumphant to be in one place and then you're reading something at the presidential inauguration. That was amazing.
Yeah, I loved that part of the story. That was just really cool, seeing just where she was before and where she's able to be in front of this huge audience, even with something that was, like a speech impediment. I don't know. That's just really cool. That's one of the things I feel like would be awesome. I just think America is good about like trying to focus on people who are struggling or have like, you know, maybe things that are like a speech impediment or something like that, and really bringing them into light and helping, you know. I can see how her story behind who she is could just be an awesome like launch of like moving forward, and just, I don't know. That was just a cool part about her background story.
I mean, it's so much about America's story too, overcoming adversity.
Right.
Yeah. And to me, I haven't had a chance to watch the inauguration or watch her speech or anything like that. And has nothing to do with who, like I typically just haven't ever watched the inaugurations and things like that. But I still am grateful, you know, that we live in a country where this is a possibility, you know. And so those have kind of been some of the reminders, you know, inside of this whole process, is that I have friends, family members. Some are honestly grieving today because they feel a sense of loss, and some are like excited because they're like, the last 4 years has been the worst, you know, of my life. And so trying to live in that empathy and feeling for both of them, because I think they both have legitimate reasons for their sadness, their fear, and then also for hope. And so but then it becomes like a reminder to me of, you know, just where my ultimate hope lies. So I'm grateful to live in this country, and beyond blessed that we live in a country where this happens, and hopeful for the future of this country. And I want comfort and all those kind of things, and want peace and that kind of stuff. And so for me, grateful for that, but also it's a reminder that, you know, our nation has had so many ups and downs. The world's had so many ups and downs, but there's been so many times where people thought it was over, you know, whether a president won or lost. I remember deep sense of sorrow at probably every single presidential, you know, kind of nomination and inauguration. But at the same time, it's always seemed for a while to have a rebound, and to have these moments of, okay, let's do this together. It's a fresh start. There's nowhere to go but up from here. And it seems like at every inauguration, at every, you know, voting, you know, turn, it's nice to have that breath of fresh air. I even, you know, I think there was some of that for people when Trump got inaugurated, and you're like, oh, that was very presidential. I haven't seen you act that presidential in some of the speeches. And there was hope of like, okay, I've seen this guy on Twitter, and maybe he is, you know, gonna, you know, turn the page and be very, you know, presidential. And so there was a hope in that moment as well. But then there's also in me created some skepticism always. It's like, all right, this is a beautiful moment. I want to cling to this, but let's see what turns out, you know? And so that's where I'm at.
Yep. We'll wait it out. We'll see what comes next in 2021. That does it for our headlines. Up next, we're going to be talking about life in community. Here at Christ Community Church, we like to say that community is our middle name. That is a slogan that can be found on several things, including our Facebook group, which if you're not part of our Facebook group and you're plugged in here at Christ Community Church, we'd love for you to join. That's a plug for the Facebook group. But Alex, I'd like you to maybe elaborate a little bit on that and why, you know, we say that, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a bigger part of what we're doing as far as our deeper life kind of experience right now. So last week we talked about Sabbath is one of those things that is really a part of having a deeper spiritual life, and deep can be, you know, ever meaningful, I feel like too. But and then prayer is one of those focuses, but one that maybe as a spiritual, you know, practice that a lot of times we don't talk about is community, or the idea of meeting together. And I think it's a biblical invitation for us. You know, we see it throughout the Old Testament. We see it in the New Testament, especially in the book of Acts, like the invitation to meet together. And obviously this year has been crazy for what that looks like. You know, people have a lot of thoughts on how meeting works, how community works, and people's minds are, I think, wrestling and grappling with new ideas of community. But I think overall, it's part of how we were created. You know, we were created by a God who is a communal God. And so we believe, you know, that there's one God in three persons. And so God exists in community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so for eternity, that's been a part of it. And so what it means to be created in the image of God is that we are people that aren't supposed to do life alone, that we need community to thrive, to live our best life, to point us to God. And so, you know, at CCC, when we use community as our middle name and we talk about journey groups, there's been tons of different names. If you go to any church, it's life group, it's city group, it's missional community, it's all of these words. But at the core of most churches, they would say one of our most important things that we do is community. We provide community for people. And so it literally is our middle name. It's a passion that we have. But it's also one of those things that I think inside of the American church or the modern church, we say it's very important, but a lot of times, unfortunately, we throw all of our time at the 1 hour experience on Sundays, which is, you know, what this podcast is about, redeeming some of that. We talk about redeeming the other 167. And so, so that's a little bit of our passion, I think. It's why it's a spiritual discipline, because God created us, wired us inherently for community. When Adam didn't have community, God's like, this isn't good. That's the only time we see God say in the creation narrative that something's not good, even though he had community with God himself. And so I think that's why it's important. That's why we're talking about it. And I think it'll be fun to talk about how that's looked in our lives and even how it's morphed in the last year.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what community life can look like, because I think you mentioned groups. Is there something beyond that format? Is there more? Is it more than that, or is it just this very almost maybe kind of rigid and scheduled event that happens?
Yeah, that's good. I think it'd be fun to talk like how, because I think it's not rigid and scheduled. I think you have to be intentional about community, but I think it'd be fun maybe a little bit to talk about what it's looked like in our lives and how it's taken different, you know, how it's morphed into different things probably at different times. And so for me, one of the, you know, my original first big communities was my family. And so obviously that's not a very scheduled, I didn't get to pick that one, but it was ever growing as I grew up because my parents adopted a good amount of my siblings and we had a ton of foster kids in us. So that was my taste of what community looked like. And then outside of that, it was church. You know, I had some really close friends, but I've been on teams that have been a part of my biggest community in sports life. And so, so I don't think it has to be a rigid thing. We all probably have community in our life in some way or another, but I think it's what that looks like. So
I would say that community is honestly one of the biggest things that actually solidified my faith in Christ, because I think growing up I was in church and I had, I went to church every week and all that kind of stuff. But then once you get to college, it's kind of like a whole new world of like, okay, you kind of decide where you're going. And I actually made a couple of friends that were involved in Crew, which was the ministry that I was in throughout college. And that was the first glimpse that I saw of actual community of like, hey, we're going to do Thursday night ministry, but then we're also going to hang out on the weekend and we're also going to hang out on Monday and we're going to do our homework together. And just like seeing that was such a new like idea and concept for me of like, oh, these people that I, read the Bible with, worship with, pray with, we're also going to like live life together and like have fun too. Like that was another thing for me. I was like, oh, Christians actually can have fun together. Like that's weird. But it honestly helped me go into a deeper relationship with God, just having that community and seeing like, oh, this is what he wants. This is his, idea of like living life together in community. And another thing was one thing that changed my view of like community and relationships with other people is like a girl that was in our ministry. We were all hanging out as a group and she just like, hey, do you want to get coffee on Saturday? And I was like, what? That's weird. Why do you want to get coffee with me? I feel really weird. Why do you want to meet with me one-on-one? Like, this is weird. But you're in college and you haven't really experienced just like those kind of relationships yet. But that honestly like changed, my view of just like Christian community of like, oh, she actually wants to get to know me better and like know more about me. It's not just like a hangout, have fun thing, but it's even deeper than that. I I don't know, community is like a huge part of just my faith and really changed my view of Christianity too.
I love how you shared that it's kind of where your faith was solidified. That's so cool, because as you're talking, I'm thinking like, yeah, like that was the first time like in community, especially as Christians, like that I've been pursued like as a friend, and like somebody asking like, how am I, like, and taking those deeper steps. Yeah. And I think in our communities that we have, especially for me, it's the place to practice love and what it looks like to tangibly be the hands and feet of Jesus. I mean, I think it's important to be in the community and to be giving, and obviously to be aware of that. I'm not taking away from that, but just, hey, like, how's your day going? Like, I know that you didn't sleep last night. Let me bring you coffee. Like, how that translates tangibly into the hands and feet of Jesus. I mean, you really see it in your community. But you're right. It's like building that and being committed to it and being in it, even when you're saying like it's a little bit uncomfortable, or there are moments where, like saying yes is hard right now.
Right. And I feel like Christians get to experience the best community because it is like that one step further. And like, I just love like kind of reaching out to like people who are non-believers and being like, hey, do you want to go get coffee? Or I would love to hear more about your life or whatever. And just to see like people's shock, or just like, what? Like, that's weird. Why do you want to get to know me better? Why do you want to know like about my life? Just, I feel like non-believers don't get to experience that. And so that's a cool thing that I feel like we can extend to non-believers too.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful narrative throughout culture, affinity groups, things like that. I mean, most sports teams and things like that build community around them, and that's really the thing that I think we're longing for. And so that's why we love to go for the Huskers or the Lakers or whoever, because a lot of times it's affinity that draws us together, but it's this deeper longing, this hardwired thing by God that's saying you are made for this, but where it gets difficult for me is like, I love community. I'm probably part of a lot of different communities, whether that's friend groups, it's working, here at the church, and there's people I'm great friends with and love being a part of this community. There's, communities that are, I was teammates with in high school or college, and we still kind of have that bond and community.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you and I, yeah. But for me, one of the biggest struggles is, over the last few years, is I've learned community for me and my needs and how I seek it looks a lot different than my wife, for example. And so we've had to work on that. Like, I'm a kind of person that I could be like in community. We could have people to our house every single day. I would like have so much energy, and it's taken me, I used to think like my wife was wrong for not wanting that to happen in our lives, like, what? Do you not care about community? This, and you would try to Jesus juke it and like, this is what God wants us to do. And so I think that's been one of the biggest learnings I've had in community, is that we need it in our lives, and we both have it deeply in our lives, but how God uses it has been different for both of us, and at different times. Like, I grew up in Omaha, and so I haven't left really Omaha, and my wife didn't grow up in Omaha. And so I've had all of these all these pockets of community just built into my life. But I've never had to leave that. And for my wife, that's a big thing, like to have to leave all of her best friends in a small town somewhere else and lack that community. And I'm like, well, why don't you just go find new friends? That's just how I am. But for her, it's not. And so I think I've learned more and more how community is difficult for a lot of people to start to establish. I'm
thinking about you, Rachel, when Alex is talking, because you moved here.
Yeah. And I am more extroverted, so it's a little bit easier for me, but it was hard when we moved here, because it's like, especially if you've been somewhere for so long, it's like people have known you like since high school or whatever, and they've seen your life and progression. You've been able to keep them up to date. They know your struggles. They know, like your life. And then to just move, it's almost like that gets completely erased. And honestly, it was even harder for me too, because I got married a week before I moved here. So my name changed a week before I moved here. So people only ever knew me as Rachel Webb, which is, my new name. They didn't even know me as, before. And so that made it even harder, because like, oh my gosh, I'm having like an identity crisis. Like nobody knows who I was, And just to make new friends, it's like there's so much. It's like before I can really get anywhere with you, you have to know who I am and my life story and what's going on and what I'm struggling with. And it's a lot. But I mean, I know every time, like we've been here almost 3 years, and it's like we've gotten back to that point where it's like, okay, I have these people in my life. It took a lot of work, but it was so worth it because now I have these friends that have been able to understand where I came from in my life story and know where I am now. And it's always worth it, even though it's just super hard when you're getting into it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jess.
Sometimes getting into it takes a long time because Ben, my husband, is an extrovert. Like if I am thinking of something and I say, hey, I think maybe we should have these people over. He's like, okay, yeah. When? Right. Like have
Tonight?
them over. And I'm like, okay, that took me a lot to get to thinking we should do that.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I present really extroverted, but I'm a homebody. Like I would love to stay home with my family. I love people. I love community, but we started a group and it probably took me a solid year to really warm up to people. So I'm speaking to the person that's maybe hesitant or feeling like I'm not getting community, and I've been trying for a couple months. I would send text messages, and we're not going to repeat everything I said, but it would always be like, I hate coming here. I don't know where I'm going. Like this is draining me. I'm tired. Like I'm not connecting with these people.
Yeah.
And it took me so long to invest. So it's okay if it takes a little bit longer, but for me, it was the practice of making an effort. And I think it goes back to, my desire is to be in a relationship with Christ. And even if we're introverted, there's some desire to find a connection with somebody, and especially being in a relationship with somebody else, like that's important to Ben. And so it took a while. We're still in the group now after 4 years, and there are people and we talk to them every day. I mean, it's a great relationship of people, but it's not always easy. And it makes it almost worth it in the end, where it's like we've been working for something, but all our stories are different, you know?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about personality types, I know I was probably an introvert in denial for most of my life because I don't know. I think it's a spectrum, right, of being an extrovert and an introvert. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
And I think for me, I get fulfillment from community, certain aspects of it, but then there are other aspects of it that it is just draining and exhausting for me. But I've always liked to, whether it was like with a band or with music or podcasts that I did on my own, I always liked kind of being, entertaining and doing that sort of thing. And I've done that in front of lots of crowds of people, and that was always really fulfilling. And so people just assumed, well, you're obviously an extrovert because this is what you like to do. But it's like when it comes to those intimate moments where I'm just stuck having a conversation with someone I don't know that well, I just don't do small talk well. And it's usually I'll say something that's either embarrassing or wrong or not the right thing to say at that moment, just because I don't know. I have that introvert part of me that wants to just kind of go and hide out for a little while. But once you build that relationship, for me anyways, that's where it's really valuable. And that's where I start to thrive, because I feel that trust is built. And you kind of hinted at that, where I think building the trust is such a big part of the journey, because if you don't have that trust, it's just easy with everything. It's easy to assume people's intentions. It's easy to assume what they think of you without actually learning what they think of you. And I think it's easy to put up walls because of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ben, anytime you want to have your wife invite us over, we'd love to. But no,
Little Caesars.
Yeah, we'll bring the Little Caesars. But no, seriously, I think one of the difficult things about being a part of a church, where we really do talk about this a lot. We say community is our middle name. It's a high value. We want people to be involved in groups, in group life. And there's a lot of different group life. I know, Jess, you lead a lot of groups for people, and that's their first taste and step into of healthy community maybe they've had. And we really do have a desire that every single person here is plugged into a group. But then I think the difficult part is, sometimes you try out a group and it just doesn't work. You're like, hey, we've tried it. And sometimes, and it's difficult to wrestle through that because sometimes you've tried out a group and it can be an excuse like, oh, we just didn't click, or, you know, they've got cats. And so like I'm allergic to cats. And I'm like, oh, I just can't go there. I guess I'm going to give up. And so there's that fine balance of, okay, I need to try something. And how do and then sometimes for me, I care a lot about what people think about me. And so sometimes I'm a people pleaser. And so if I go to a group, and even if I don't like it, I'm like the kind of person that's like willing to bite my tongue and be happy and do all that kind of stuff, just so I don't have to have the awkward conversation of, you know, this is great. You guys are awesome people.
It's not you, it's me.
And we're so, I think in Christianity sometimes too, we don't like to have the DTRs, the determine the relationship kind of things, because we don't want to hurt people. And even if somebody like doesn't want to come to my group or come back to groups I've been a part of, you know, it takes a lot for me to like, you want to know why. And so on both sides of that, you're like, did we do something wrong? And so there's just like a tension and a risk that you're willing to take. And so how have you guys navigated, you know, that inside of groups, or have you like been to, you know, a part of certain groups for a certain amount of time and like, because you said you weren't comfortable, right?
No.
But now like 4 years later, you are comfortable.
Right. And I still think about that tension. And so for me, I do this in all my groups, even when I'm counseling a client, I do check-ins. So like our group, like, I will say, hey, I'm okay. Are you guys okay? And create that safe space to say, hey, no, like we're thinking about doing something different, or this isn't right for us, and creating that safe space. That's like what I felt like I needed, and it wasn't there. And so I created that, and it happens every once in a while. Now other people it happened, I think it was this week that people were like, hey, how's this going for you guys? This is how it's for me. So that's a way for me. It's almost like creating a little safety plan that I'll check in and say, hey, this is how I feel. How are you feel? Yeah. And then just create that space.
That's really good. Yeah. I was just thinking about my husband, Eric, and we joined a group when we were dating. And I don't know how we got connected to this group, but it was like the first night and we were all kind of going around like sharing about ourselves. And every single person was like, yeah, I played in the band and I am doing this instrument in college now and I'm a part of this band. And like everyone was going around talking about their instruments and their music and like all their like artsy creative stuff. And then it like got to us and like, what instrument do you play? Or like, what do you, and we're like, what? Like what?
We like football.
I don't know. Like we never played. And so, but it was like also from that night on, like every week it was like somehow it led back to like music and instruments, and they're like, we should all bring our instruments and play together one time worship night, and we're like, I don't what I'll clap, like I don't know what
I'll bring my tambourine,
like this is weird. And so it was one of those situations where it was like, oh, this is really awkward, like we do not fit in this group at all. Like we know we don't, and just like how do you navigate out of that? And we were a little bit younger, so we were just like, we'll just stick it out until we move, like but it's just like
in the meantime you're learning the guitar.
But it's just like one of those things where it's like you just know when you're not in the place where you are fit as well. And it's not a bad, like we loved those people, it wasn't anything against them, it's just like the things that they were focused on and more around, it's not what we were, it's almost like also life stages. Like if you were a single person and you were in a group with a bunch of married people who had kids, you're probably might not feel like you fit in that group as well, because they're not really thinking about the same things that you might be thinking about. And that's okay. Like I think it's okay to try and find your fit where you feel more known and a part of a group. But that was our one experience. We're like, oh, that was awkward.
When I think like moments like that, that's why it's important to also have some deep trusted community of people that you're like, hey, walk me through this, like, should I continue to go to this group? How do I have this conversation with with these people? Because there are times, when I worked in student ministry, there was times that, girls in high school or whatever, guys they'd want to fight, and so their answer to like, they were best friends, it's like the roommate situation where they tell you, do not become roommates with your best friend and that's going to blow up. And so there's moments where people would come to a group and then, they'd have a catty fight and they're like, we want out of this. They want the easy exit plan, and they'd come to us as staff and their parents, and we're like, man, we really think the healthiest thing is for them to be able to work through this, in community. How do you work through this? How do you build unity together in this? Because this is going to be a really important life lesson later on. And so we were able to, as staff, as people that were looking from a loving, perspective, try to say, hey, here's the value, because sometimes the value is in the pain. Sometimes the most painful things that are happening, and scripture says, iron sharpens iron, and so does one man sharpen another. Well, in the sharpening process, there's some sparks that fly. And so having other people that you're inviting into your life, I think that's why mentorship is so important. I think that's why, having people that you trust that are maybe further ahead of you in life, maybe they're not, you wouldn't say they're my community. They're the people I'm doing life with all the time, but they're people that you know and trust that you're inviting to speak into your life in those kind of moments. Because I want to run, when things get difficult, but I'm grateful for moments where I have worked through tension with people in community life, because that's made our relationships, our bonds stronger. And then there's some of the people I would go to bat with, through some of the most difficult times in my life. And if I would have taken the easy way out, then I wouldn't have gotten all the community that I think God wanted for me in my life.
What do you guys think about this? Because I think when we're looking for community, when I say looking for community, I'm putting myself in a consumer, like I'm maybe buying or shopping. But at some point, we need to make the choice to be a contributor to our community. So what do you think that looks like? If someone's maybe looking for a healthy community? And working on themselves, like where do we need to be?
I feel like I think maybe that kind of goes along with this. It's like you can't just have a one like size fits all kind of thing. Like I feel like being in a group, like a journey group like we have, is just part of it. It's not the whole picture. Like I think you have to think about other relationships that you have. Like I'm a part of a journey group, but I also have a friend that I meet with every week, and we go through a Bible study together, and we also share like things that are going on in our life, and we pray for each other. But I also have a group of friends that don't even go to our church with us, that we meet with like at least once a month, and like they, know what's on our hearts, and they know our prayer requests, and we're encouraging each other. And so that's like so many different parts of my community that I'm not just relying all on this one community to give me everything that I need, because that would never be possible. So yeah, just like looking around a different area. You might know someone at work that, is also a believer, and you can, look to them in your workspace and have the similarity of work, but also that you love God together. And that's another person that's going to be a different part of your community. So it's not all just going to be in a one group kind of situation, I think.
I think some of it goes back to what Alex was saying, where if you're someone with that personality trait, which I also feel like a lot of times I'm like a people pleaser in the idea that I don't want to let people down. Like if they feel that I'm in some way going to let them down, that crushes me in a lot of ways. And so to join a group and then go, okay, I'm trying not to be a consumer here. I'm trying to be a contributor, but this is a bad fit.
All the pressures.
Where do you go from there, and how do you work through that? I know we kind of talked on some of those points, but I also think they're I don't know if practical is the correct word to describe it, but I think there are like social economical things too that are different. Like sometimes I would think, well, what if, I know the Christ community has families from all over Omaha, all different walks of life, different income brackets. And so I would think, okay, well, maybe I should start a group, right? I'll be a contributor that way. I'll start a group. But like, my house, is it going to be, if I invite these people who make, six figures and, into my house that's maybe not as nice as they're used to, or if, the food I have or the drinks I have, whatever, if it's not up to par with what they would expect, what are they going to think of me? And then that leads to the next thing and the next thing. And then it's this whole road of comparison that you start to go down, which we've talked about comparison and how it's a trap, and it's true. But I think that sometimes there are these elements that we don't always want to talk about or don't want to think about because it's not the spiritual thing. It's not the biblical thing necessarily, but I think it's all part of it. It really is. And so sometimes when you can just find your way into community and it works and you've known these people, and that's great. But I think just to go out on a limb when you feel like you're just hard. Stepping into a dark room, it's really scary. I think for a lot of people.
Agree.
Yeah, I think, if we're going to give some baby steps to people for, okay, where do you even begin?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of baggage, reasons that, maybe lack of trust, maybe you've been burned in relationships, you were a part of another church or a group, and there's a lot of reasons, I think, for people to be concerned about it and be looking. But I think if we were just to give a baby step here at CCC on it, I think one of the things that's great is there's classes, so they have like end dates, and so most of our groups, we hope, like we do life together is a DNA statement. We want people not just attending something, but like sharing things in their life. And it takes a while, but maybe jumping into a class, is one of the, and we try to do this, with, pre-marriage. We do pre-marriage classes here. And so we try to say, hey, maybe you two connected and you could be a part of a group together. We've got financial peace. That's something that's coming up. And so maybe it's trying out a class, kind of getting your toes wet. There's an end date. So you're like, okay, I can do this, for 6 weeks. I can put up with these people, or I can kind of work through some of these things, maybe connect there. Yeah. And so I think, trying a class would be one of those safe places. We've even got some online classes I know that are happening around certain affinities over the next few weeks. And so it's like very low bar to be able to be a part of something like that. And then maybe you're like, okay, this is feeding my soul a little bit. Hey, we're in the same life stage as these people. Maybe we could talk there about, starting a group together or being in community together. So I think there's some simple ways. Maybe it's just literally if you come here on site, it's, turning around and seeing a couple that looks like you and looks like they're in the same life stage as you or whatnot.
Or maybe they don't.
Yeah, or they don't. But you're just like drawn, there's moments where I'm like, I should talk to that person. I don't know why. And so maybe it's having those conversations, or you're one of the people that watches online every week. It's jumping in the chat, saying hi to a certain person.
That's great.
Asking more about that type of, about their life and delving in, some of those easy ways, I think.
That's awesome.
Did that answer your question?
That's great. I love it.
I think there is, I mean, we are built to be consumers. And so there is going to be some, if there's not give and take in a community life, that's wrong. Not good.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So you want to be contributing definitely to that, but you also, I wouldn't just call it consuming, but you do.
I was almost thinking committing or there's a lot.
It is a commitment, though, in a lot of ways, too. Like you said, you said you've been with the same group for 4 years. Did you think in the beginning that was even going to be possible?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think
and then it took that DTR that you're talking about. Like, okay, are we doing this? Yeah. Like, are we really doing? Okay, are we still doing this?
I think for me, a couple of years ago, one of the most difficult things was like got back on staff here at Christ Community. We joined a group of people, all totally random. I mean, all happenstance. Like we all moved. Most people just moved and started attending CCC, and we built these deep, meaningful relationships, and it was great. And then like the Holy Spirit is like, hey, there's other people looking for this. There's other people that want what you have. And maybe it's time to multiply that. And so sometimes maybe if you've been in a group where a community is so good, maybe it's thinking, man, who are people in my neighborhood or people at this church that this is so good, and that's a good thing, but maybe it's so good that other people need it. And so maybe that's even a step for somebody that's been in community. Maybe that's, a step for your group or whatever is like, we've been together for 4 years, and we've developed these beautiful bonds, but man, what do we have to offer? How many more people could experience what we're experiencing if we make that difficult decision to say, hey, maybe we need to multiply.
I think one important thing that maybe we haven't completely hit on is just the what community brings to us as Christians. And I think the number one thing it brings is accountability. I think we live, I'm sure it was a meme or something I saw, but it was something like, because of social media, everyone knows who we are, but we're accountable to no one, and I think that's so, it's just so true to our society right now, is that we aren't a lot of times accountable for who we are. We're not, who are you talking to? Who is someone that you're sharing what you're going through? And I think also in a church community, especially if someone's new to the faith, they're going to think, well, I can't share my real struggles with these people because, they're Christians. What are they going to think of me? And that's one of those things where it's, you want to create an environment where people are going to feel safe and feel comfortable to talk about those things, and move past that facade, where so many times Christian life can turn into this facade of, well, everything's perfect, everything's good. Mm-hmm. And I think you bring in that accountability, you actually can have a group of people that you can talk about the things that are actually facing you. I know that I've heard examples of where maybe it's a bigger group, but the men and the women kind of separate at different times and do their own things so that they can hold each other accountable for issues that probably can't be talked about in a larger group. And I think a lot of that is important to just keep developing that, and whatever way it looks like, whatever way it might take form.
Yeah. And I think it's going to take work. It's never just easy. You can fly under the radar. You can come to church on Sunday morning, go in, listen to the sermon and leave. And you can fly under the radar. You can go into a journey group and fly under the radar. You can go in and leave and never really actually initiate, deeper relationships. It takes that extra step, and sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But those are always the moments that kind of push you over the edge of okay, I actually trust this person now, or I actually know more about their life and see where they're coming from. So I want to listen to what they have to say. I want to, dive in deeper with them. And, so I just think it takes effort and it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's not easy.
Are you saying that maybe people could build empathy?
Yeah,
from it?
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember one of the things when I was the middle school pastor here was our small group numbers were growing, and our Sunday morning 9 a.m. thing was getting smaller. And I got asked that by some people because sometimes on paper that doesn't look good. And to me, I was like, because kids are so busy, families are so busy, and so I would tell parents, if you had to pick between attending our 1 hour service on a Sunday or coming to a small group, pick small group. If you have to make that choice, and I could try to talk them off the edge of making that choice, but I still think someone's to even be wrestling with that, that's a great discipleship win. And so where's the place you're going to get fed? Where's the place you're going to find accountability the most? Where is all of that? Yes, I think our Sunday morning services are great, and there's things that God's going to do in our lives that are different than community, and there's something powerful about being a part of a bigger group and singing songs with other people that have been sung for thousands of years, and doing the benediction and saying the Lord's Prayer and having communion. All of those things are perfect and holy. They're great tools. But I think for people that are like, well, here it is, I've got an hour to give right now a week. My encouragement would say, man, I know you wouldn't be a stat on a Sunday morning, but if you can get plugged into community, I would say that is the primary place that you are going to grow. They're both a tool that God's going to use in your life. And so, man, maybe that's something that you're wrestling with. He's like, I've got 1 hour, and I assume if you're listening to this, you're at least listening, and you're saying, this is important enough to take in. I want to build in my relationship with Jesus, or whatever reason you're coming to this. But you're like, I've got 1 hour where I can give to community, or give to worshiping Jesus. Maybe that will get me in trouble, but my encouragement would say, man, if you have to make the choice between the two, I think being in community with people and living life, doing life together is primary. And I think the worship services, those things will come into play, and you'll want to be a part of them more and more, and you'll feel a part of a bigger community and all that kind of stuff. But that would be my encouragement to people too.
Yeah, I think I want to add too that if people are listening, I think there's probably going to be several people who are in a similar boat as me. And I've been here, 3.5 years. And I've found community in a lot of different ways. I mean, this podcast being one. I work here, so relationships with staff and like that. But I know for my wife and I, on a personal level, we never really got plugged into a group in all this time. And I think, and this is just me being a little bit vulnerable for someone who might be in that same position. There's different times we had discussed it and, maybe barely started to pursue it. But then, with COVID this last year, it just kind of was like, oh, okay, that it just went all the way further than the back burner, and for one, I'm sharing this, almost as, hey, this is a great way for me to be accountable, right? But I also think this is a way for people who are in that same boat, because I think there are a lot of people, and it's easy after a while to kind of slip by and just go, okay, well, maybe I don't need it, or maybe it isn't going to work, or I don't have time for it, or whatever excuse. There's a whole list of them that you could make. But I think I think that's going to be one of the challenges for me in 2021 is to find that group, to find that community. And I think, and if for anyone listening, if we're in the same boat, I'll send me a message and we'll start a group. No, I'm just kidding. But if
I was wondering if you were going to say that.
But I'm just I think that's a reality for a lot of people, especially.
I agree,
because I hear Alex going, well, maybe you'll see someone and you're like, I just need to go up and talk to them, and no, that'll never happen. I'll never do that. That's not some people that's going to work that way, but for me that would never happen. I can never impose on someone that way, because in my mind I'm thinking, what if they're like me, and if a stranger came up to me and said, I just feel a connection with you, Bob, I'd be like, peace out. I'm out.
The slow back up, and then the run.
This is not good.
But also, I don't think it has to be as scary either as walking up to like a connections booth and like putting your name in a hat and being like, I don't know, put me in a group. I don't know who it's going to be, but like you already have connections. Like here, it's like you can go up to Alex. Hey, I heard you have a journey group. Like we've already made a connection.
Why have you never invited me to your journey group?
Exactly.
Alex, you haven't invited Eric?
Oh man. No, but I do, and that's not a dig at Alex. This is but it is an honest thing. Like I think sometimes, I think for an introvert, especially for better or worse, the more self-aware they become of them being introverted, it's like, I don't want to impose or assume something of someone and think that they would want me to be part of this thing or whatever. I do think people who are listening and are in a, like you mentioned, Alex, like if you're in a thriving group and maybe you could spread the love a little bit, like think about those people, think about those people that you maybe haven't asked, because a lot of times they're not going to be the ones who are going to be forward about it. They probably need that nudge to be like, hey, definitely. I'd like to have you part of this thing. I think that's important.
Yeah,
for all of us, there's definitely, and this is, a cheesy thing that we'd probably use here, but a best next step, I think, for somebody to take. So for somebody, that best next step might be multiplying your group so that a person like Eric, or someone that's in his shoes might be able to be invited, but you're like, especially in COVID, it's like, you can only have so many people on it, whether it's a Zoom call for it not to like be crazy or in person or whatever. And so maybe it's thinking through, okay, God, what do you have for us in the season with this group? What's the invitation that you have for us to take that best next step, to do life together? But these are all things that we want to be part of our DNA here at Christ Community, is that we're people that do life together, that there's always room for one more. That's even what your shirt says. And that's not just like a cool shirt.
Oh, I thought it was just a cool brand.
But it's, we want to always be thinking about other people. Like growing the church is not about numbers, but it's about like souls bending their knee to Jesus and being in community and finding love and acceptance forever. It's not just about our church becoming the biggest, best place in the world, because not everybody in Omaha would ever fit into this church or to this building, because the church is the people. But it's about more and more people knowing who Jesus is, more and more people loving their neighbors well, looking more like Jesus, because that's what our world needs. And it takes one person at a time and one invitation at a time in our lives, I think. So
it's good.
All right, there you have it. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to all of you for having this conversation. It's a good one to have, and it's good for people to know that they belong, even when they don't maybe they don't feel like it. If you have any questions or concerns, you'd like to reach out to us, we'd love to hear from you. You can do that on social media at CCC Omaha, or you can send us an email to this very podcast at podcast@cccomaha.org. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Maybe you have some topic ideas you'd like us to discuss, or you have questions, or you want to invite me to your journey group. Send us a message. Until next time, we'll talk to you then.